Hello.
Hello, Hasan. We're going to use my phone. We are really using every piece of technology that's at our fingertips. We had our viewers write in, and they certainly can hear you. So we'll use my phone, and if you can be in front of your computer with the presentation, we'll move forward in that way. Perfect. Okay, so let me go back to my chatting here. The webinar is being recorded. The webinar is being live captioned. There is a CC button at the bottom of your screen. Open the link to send it to all your participants in chat. And there will be time at the end. There will be time at the end for chat, Q&A, and hand functions. And we'll definitely share the resources in chat. So next slide, C. Let's see, who's in our audience? And that would be a great way to start this. And Janice, if you'd like to pull up a poll. So for all of our listeners, if you can certainly take a look at what we've got, we'll get an idea of who's out there, who's participating today. Okay. Oh, okay. So far, you know, our poll is, it looks like our poll is finished. Hasan, are you still here? Hasan? Hasan Davis, are you still here? Okay, so we have a percentage of students. I would say most of the folks today on our webinar are from an agency or organization staff. We have several young adults who are not in high school and some that are in high school. So 5% are in high school, and as far as the youth and adults not in high school, we have 7%. But I'd say most of our listeners today are from an agency or organization staff. Thank you, Janice, for the poll. Hasan, are you able to see that?
I can't see that, but I hear you.
Okay, good. I'll just keep talking through it then. And Hasan, are you able to look at your presentation?
Yes, I am. Thank you.
Okay. Janice, if you'd like to advance. So now we're looking at this is where I'm going to hand it over to Hasan. We're on the slide that says the race. And if people have technical difficulties and cannot hear, please do let me know. Hasan, over to you.
Thank you. Good morning, everybody, and I apologize for these technical difficulties. Thank you all for bearing with us. I'd like to start by sharing a poem with you. It may be a little more challenging for me not having the screen, but I think that our folks there are going to take care of us, keep us going. It's called The Race. It was a day like the rest, me sitting right there with the lost kids in another special class where we would fit the round pegs into square holes all day as the teachers excused we were just made that way. There's no need to be worried. You've no reason to stress. Your poor lives are not fair, so you just do your best. These last words they'd sing and then settle us all down, passing glue and round scissors for our popsicle stick crowns. And while crafting a band for my popsicle crown, I reached hand in the pocket and guess what I found? It was a note from my mother. Again, like last week, a reminder things don't have to stay as we see. Written bold in block letters, more easily read. Still took me a while, but here's what that note said. I will love you each day like the first you were mine, but to change in their eyes, you must first change your mind. If you want new results, you can't accept what they say about your needs that make them think this box is okay. But an eagle with chicks does not mean he's to blame, but he must one day fly, son, or fail just the same. To raise you up high, any risk I would take, but you, my dear boy, you must plan this escape. So keep your mind on your dreams and your eyes on the door. The inevitable victory can still be yours.
Next slide,
now,
please.
Please, actually, I have probably a couple slides.
Okay. That would be helpful on our end. Hasan, if you just let us know when to advance. Next slide. Now we have glue. Okay. And we'll go past this one, Janice.
And you can leave it at the paper.
At the paper? Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Not the desk. Okay.
Not having a clue what that last line inferred, I returned to my crown with not much of a word. There I sat in the days of the work I'd been working, till I noticed strange sounds like free birds that were chirping. The next minute there I spent disbelieving. No way could my eyes see what they were perceiving. A window had appeared where there'd been none before among these walls and locks and peepholes and doors. From where this thing came, I could hardly have guessed, but bright light, the cool breeze had all captured my breath. And outside the window I heard sounds unknown, sounds of cheering, of laughter, of loud microphones. There were announcers announcing on loudspeakers, speaking, welcoming all the champions that came from last weekend. She said, today is today, and last week was back then. On a day like this, folks, anyone could still win. Now, looking back, I realized they did not expect me to take those words, that excitement, so personally, but there's no control over the words that we say. Once out of our mouth, they translate their own way, and every ear that can hear must interpret for self. So I picked up my note and started up the bookshelf. And I slipped past that teacher and over the pane of the window before they could close it again. Then I shimmied down columns just right for escaping and rushed myself over where students were pacing. I arrived at this field, was amazed by the scene of these runners and jumpers on all types of teams. They were stretching and reaching after prepping for months to take the first challenge and clear the high jump. And like antelope, they leaped. None knew fear or seemed hopeless, so I slipped into line, praying no one would notice. But someone did see through my thin-veiled disguise. It might have been the boots or the scared look in my eyes. I beg, please let me try, sir. This looks like a blast. Not like making those crowns from old popsicle trash. But the judges hemmed and then hawed and explained the plain truth. Your training, your build are not for this pursuit. They removed me from line as the stars began starting. When from up in the bleachers, big voices began barking. Maybe he's lightning, just been bottled too long. You might think he's weak, but what if he is strong? Nobody would ever try as hard as he tried. And even if he falls down, he most likely won't die. From what I can guess were new fans of mine. And my mother, who must have been there the whole time, came demands I be given one shot at that bar, despite having no chance to show talent thus far. So they made me some room, and they let me back in, quite sure there was no way I could actually win. But then the time came, and I was finally on, at the line with the silence so deafeningly long. In good humor, they played, started lowering the bar for this unknown, untested, not right superstar. But I whispered and waved, hey, you raise that right back. I can't break your records with a low jump like that. And so rolling their eyes and with fiendish sly grins, they quick raised my bar all the way up to 10. As they smiled and high-fived, I heard one of them say, do you think that boy's smart enough to just walk away? But they all looked surprised as in hiking boots clumping, I dashed for the mark they had set for my jumping. And with vision so clear I could hardly see through it, I leapt for that bar as if nothing were to it. There I floated. No, sailed. As the whole crowd stopped breathing, watching me attempt this, they were not quite believing. Now, I didn't quite make it over. Well, more truthful to say, see, I barely made half of the distance that day. And no sooner flat on the mat, I was pumping my fist, making it clear to the crowd I was quite new to this. What they could not have known from the smile on my face was that 5 feet had just crushed my best jump to that day. It was 4 feet higher than the mark in 3rd grade where they started to track me and how I behaved. It was 2 feet higher than a middle school buzzing. They said, soon you'll be dead or in jail like your cousins. this mark was the highest that had ever been set. And after trying, I knew I was not quite done yet. So I stopped my odd dancing in time to report there were students lining up for some other great sport. But before I could reach the next crowded start line, I was boxed and closed in by some old friends of mine. They were sent to track down the fugitive child from room 8 for a quiet return to his class, to his place. Once back there, they tried to downplay that whole scene, suggesting that life, for me, was just a pipe dream. There are round pegs in your future. These square holes must be filled. It's good work for the hands and your particular set of.
Hasan, what slide are we on, Hasan?
Should be a desk.
Thank you.
More names I could not recognize, including one signed A. Lincoln since 1825. And in the top right-hand corner, between all of the lines, there was just enough space left to make this desk mine. Next slide. Before my eyes could dim back to the early blank states, I remember the sound of the fans at the race where my mother stood shouting, waving banners sky high. So what if you fall down, boy? You most likely won't die. Then I grabbed some crayons and a big butcher sheet, started drafting notes I'd long feared to speak. And with those popsicle sticks, I began to build up a small room, and complete was a full replica of this box, where some said I would live my life out, where none would hear my mad shouts or would see my sash. Then I placed in this room where brave looker might see one red X on the wall where that window must still be. Then glancing around like I'd not done before, I spied keys to the locks on the chain by the door. Since all the teachers were busy passing more crayons and paste, I left a note on their desk. Gone to find my next race. Next slide. Gone to find my next race. The conversation that I want to have today is about how we transition ourselves from the places people think we ought to be, the life people think we ought to have, to the one we're willing to pursue. I wrote this poem years ago to reflect on my own experiences of being separated, being isolated, and being removed as a young person with different learning styles and abilities. And as I've done this work as an adult, working and running systems, I realize that there's still lots of places where young people who are differently able and differently gifted still find themselves being isolated and removed from their best opportunities to reach their own dreams, whatever those dreams are. And I hope that the conversation we have this morning will be a conversation that allows us some insights, but also gives us a chance to reflect on the work that we do as young people, advocating and fighting for our own rights to be engaged in the world the way we choose, or as champions and hope dealers, those folk working in systems as advocates and as supports to make sure that we are creating a space in a partnership with the folks that we serve for them to reach the place that they want to be in the world. Next slide. I originally titled this conversation, "When Will All Mean All?" But as I thought about it, I should have just entitled it, "Gone to Find My Next Race." And I think I want that to be the core of the conversation. Now, before I move on, I really want to to give you a little bit of information about me. I work primarily in justice, education, and child welfare, and make more accurately the intersection of those things. And in my work, I've noticed some very disturbing trends. Next slide, please. Is that the restraint, seclusion, arrest, suspension?
Yes.
I wanted to share with you all some data just because I think it's important. Data really is a driver of all the work that we ought to be in. And young people experiencing the world differently, I want you to see this in particular because this is the way we frame our experience. If we can understand the things that are lined against us, the things that are the deck as it is stacked, then we can navigate differently to ensure that we don't get caught up in the results that traditionally happen. And if you look at this slide, you can see very clearly at every stage and phase, young people experiencing disabilities, as it's defined by the IDEA, experience lots of challenges in school. Although young people with disabilities represent 12% of the student population, there's 75% of those who are physically restrained at school. Although they're 12% of the population, they're 58% of all students who are placed in seclusion or involuntary confinement. Although we're only 12% of the student population, we're more than 25% of the students that are arrested or referred to law enforcement. Students experiencing disabilities are twice as likely to receive suspension than students without disabilities. And so that initially ought to be a red flag. When we talk about advocacy and self-advocacy, when we talk about going in and fighting for our right to be present, this is the kind of data we need to be using to make it clear that we won't be another statistic, that we expect to be treated and have the same access and opportunity as other folks. And if it take and to be committed to that in our own heads and hearts. Next slide, please. In 2012, it was reported that 3 million students annually lose instruction or seat time due to school removal. That's enough students. This really blew my mind. Enough students to fill every major baseball stadium and NFL football stadium in the country simultaneously. Suspensions are still among the leading indicators of whether a student will drop out of school and increases the risk of future incarceration. So you may be wondering where I'm going with this. Just follow me for a few seconds. I think that it'll become clear how this slippery slope starts to interact with young people experiencing disabilities. Next slide. Research has shown that from Everyone Graduate Center at Johns Hopkins University, that suspension increases the chance of leaving school prior to graduation. It doubles the possibility of it. Students who are excluded are 29% more likely to drop out. The effects of exclusion and suspension can be cumulative, with each additional suspension increasing risk of dropout. Next slide, please. And so this is the image we get. Young people who experience suspension are more likely to drop out. The more suspensions, the more the likelihood. And this is where we're tied in. Next slide, please. The dropout rates directly impact a young person's trajectory and possibility for future success. Next slide. At one point, I served as Commissioner of Juvenile Justice for the state of Kentucky. Running a juvenile justice system, every day I had a chance to see and understand what was driving young people out of the halls of class, of schools and support services into these dark places with doors that lock. And dropout is one of the major indicators. In fact, as you see on this slide, dropouts are 3.5 times more likely than graduates to be arrested, 8 times more likely to experience jail or prison, and 63 times more likely than high school graduating, college-going peers to experience long-term institutionalization. And so quickly, when you summarize all the information that I've shared so far, young people experiencing disabilities are much more likely throughout their educational career to experience barriers that would make them more willing or more susceptible to being pushed out, pulled out, or dropped out. And that dropout creates a greater likelihood of continued engagement with the wrong systems, criminal justice systems, and instead of the systems of supports and services. Next slide, please. And that leads to what I see nationally as an overrepresentation in juvenile justice settings, in juvenile corrections of young people with disabilities. And so I use this data often, one, when I'm speaking, whether I'm speaking to legislators about law reform and justice and education and its inclusion work in particular, or if I'm talking to advocates and self-advocates. Because I think one of the things that happens very often is we don't know how the system is shaped, and so we don't recognize the actions that we're taking that might be feeding it, or things that we could do to alleviate some of that. And I think it's important for us to have that knowledge wherever we stand in the work, to make sure that we have the best chance of succeeding in moving students and other young folks along the track to success beyond the challenges that they face in other school settings. Next slide. And a lot of these experiences are dramatic and traumatic. They create challenges to development, and sometimes, like myself, with folks who are already experiencing, naturally occurring challenges, and they have the external drama and trauma that are really pushing them. Next slide. I really wanted to show, this should be a diagram of the youth development stages. It's developed by a woman named Dana Swayze in the Minnesota Department of Juvenile Justice. I've used this slide. I met with her once at a big justice convening, and she was sharing, and there weren't really many people at our small session interested in looking at this, but the first time I saw this, I recognized immediately how impactful this would be in our work. If we look at this, she has taken all the major theories of development, and she's tracked them along with adolescent brain development neuroscience, the last 25 years of work on adolescent brain development. And she's created what I call the adolescent brain clock. And if you look at it quadrant by quadrant, it tracks the developmental milestones that a young person has to go through to successfully matriculate to adulthood. And every time a young person experiences one of those barriers to success, that trauma, that pain of being secluded or isolated, family adjustments and changes, having to fight for more often than other people, just the right to stay in classrooms or to stay in environments that are healthy and supportive. Every time those types of things happen, I always say the clock stops. That means that there's a developmental time delay until systems right themselves or we get to a point where things are moving again. But what happens over time is that young person might find themselves moving through these quadrants and eventually being seconds, minutes, even hours behind their peer cohort due to those disruptions and interruptions. So that when we get to that point where we're starting to look at adulthood, we've still not developed the support systems and the developmental strength to navigate the world. And that's usually where young people who were just silent and frustrated get more vocal and frustrated. And that becomes the cue for many education systems and other child service systems to eject those students who are most in need of support and services out. And hence, we wind up looking at juvenile justice very often again. And then adult corrections. The data in adult corrections is just as disturbing, the number of people who have been failed by systems as children that wind up there as a default. And so I want that to be the frame of the conversation. Next slide, please. But I do believe that one of the ways that we mitigate that, and one of the things that I learned as a person struggling through those, was creative outlet. Finding a way to express myself creatively so that the world could start to understand. That's why I started writing. My mother encouraged me early on to write my experiences down so that I could share them with the world much more effectively than screaming and swinging at people like I used to do. And I got into theater and using expression as an important piece. And so I think having those opportunities, creating those opportunities for expression and engagement through the arts and creative community making make a difference. Next slide. Because I think it's all about the affective domain. You know, we learned a lot about Bloomberg's taxonomy and the cognitive domain and all the work of cognition, but I really feel that emotional connection and really strong emotional health, affective health, feeling health, empathy are all tools that really allow us to navigate and move through the world more effectively, because our ability to connect with others and build rapport and relationship really do add value, not just to us, but all the data shows that it adds value to the folks that we're in community with also. That's why it's so important when I talk to educators and education leaders about inclusive educational environments, because all the data shows that it's not just that you're serving me better by being in the room where I can really stretch past where I am in the moment, but it actually shows that the young people in those classrooms with me develop better, have higher test scores on average, and higher empathy ratings on average. And so it really does build a culture stronger when we have the ability for all of our young people to support and navigate learning together. Next slide. Just a quick note on social emotional learning, because I think that that's an important part of the frame that I have used. Next slide. And again, the idea of building those pro-social connections. I only have about 85 slides here, and I know that we don't have that much time, but it's just my comfort zone. I like slides. I like images more than anything. Next slide, please. This should be a quote on hope.
Yes.
I realize that hope for me, and I keep saying for me because one of the things that I've learned is that I can give ideas to others, but I really only know my own experience. And I use that very often. I leverage my experience. But my experience has shown me that hope is one of those things that's often present. And if we're willing to really invest in it, in fact, you only have the opportunity for hope if there's some kind of challenge or despair. If life is really good, you don't have to be hopeful. You just have to have expectations that are reasonable, because life is good. And so only through facing challenges can you actually imagine what hope would be. And hope, this idea of this, my imagination of what hope is when I think about the work that we do, that seed planted in rocky soil that we still plant because the possibility is there. Next slide. I wanted to share more about my own experience. One of the things that I realized when I first began putting this presentation together was that I very often spend time in my professional head as an educator, as an advocate, a juvenile justice reformer, and those are things that are very important to me. But I think that when I get to the opportunities to really speak to young folks who are having a lived experience and to folks who are working with them, sometimes it's good to just start at the beginning and make it clear why this is the most important work that I do. I was born with severe visual challenge and hard of hearing, loss of hearing in my left ear. As I began to get older and attend school, it became clear that I also could not do the things that lots of other quote-unquote normal kids could do as far as processing and engaging in the moment in the work of the classroom. In the first grade, one day my teacher became very frustrated at the little boy who couldn't sit still, who couldn't stop touching things and wouldn't stop asking questions about stuff that had nothing to do with anything going on in the classroom. And it turns out that he couldn't take lines and make letters, couldn't take letters and make words, and he couldn't take words and make sense. And So on this day, the teacher finally fed up with having to deal with this child. She grabbed him up by the arm and she dragged him across the room in front of his classmates to the back of the room, to the closet, the code room, where they keep all the stuff that nobody uses. And when she got in the room, she turned to this little boy and she said, "This is your new classroom now." And on the way out the door, she locked it behind her. And that became the ritual. Every morning she would drag him across the room to this box, lock the door, and walk away to serve the other children that deserved her time. I would scream at those walls, and I would punch the coach, and I would rail against the world. But, you know, every day I went home, I didn't tell my mother because I thought this is the place I deserve to be. Because why would a teacher have to waste her time on a child that's never going to be anything in the world? But my mother always taught me there's two things you can do when you find yourself in a difficult situation. First, try to figure out how you got in that situation, and then see if there's something you can do to make that situation valuable to you. It's a lesson I've learned and tried to repeat over and over again. But every day I would go into this room, and I knew why I was there, because I was the broken child, but I didn't know how to make this useful. In the first grade was my first year of life with my parents divorced, and my mother working to support 4 children on her own. We started going on and off the food stamp rolls, and not always having everything we needed to eat, and not always having everything that we wanted. But my mother always made it work. So sitting in that box day after day, one day I looked up, and as I dried my tears and cleared my throat from screaming, and I realized that at the top of the code room, above all of the jackets, were all of the lunch boxes of every child in the classroom. And so then I figured out what my reason was. My mother said, figure out how you got there and how you use it. And maybe that was God's plan, for me to be in a place where there was food aplenty, a bounty of food. Because Susie had the peanut butter jelly sandwiches without the crust. Bobby always had fruit cups, and Jimmy always had Tang instant breakfast drinks. For you young folks, Tang is what we had before Capri Sun, before we had juice boxes, and it was the most amazing drink on the planet, literally. And so for a few days, I ate great until mommy started to come to school complaining about their children coming home hungry, and they had to investigate the mystery of the code room like a Scooby-Doo episode. And there I was with lunchboxes spread around me like a buffet. And that teacher was so embarrassed and angry at that little boy who eats other children's food that she drug him out of that box, back across the classroom to that chair right next to the teacher's desk, the special chair where she can keep an eye on you all the time. And she did it out of frustration. She did it out of embarrassment and anger at the situation that she was in. But what she actually did, not by choice, completely accidentally, was restart my clock. She created a possibility where there had been none the day before. And sometimes that is the only thing that we get, a small glimmer of light in darkness, and we have to follow it and push toward it as hard as we can. That became my experience of life. Throughout my childhood, I was consistently and regularly removed from classrooms, sat in hallways, sent to special rooms with no windows, told that I could sit out, there was going to be a test, and so I would go somewhere else for the day. Those types of experiences. And my mother was very often the one who intervened in those moments before they became catastrophic to my own mental health and success. But the system continued at every step to try and remind me that I wasn't supposed to be anything more or want anything more. And so my entire childhood, it was that experience through 5 different elementary schools and living in 13 different homes. There was a lot of instability, but I had that advocate, that one champion, my hope dealer, that never strayed from her mission to make sure that I had everything that I needed, and her mission to make me believe I had a right to everything that I wanted. I started alternative school in the 8th grade, and I was in alternative school for the rest of my high school. And it was a unique school because at Horizons, the administrator there understood what it was to be differently able to really teach to every child, which I think that every school ought to do, but apparently that's not their mission. But she would ensure that in the classes where I could not compete with my peers in one way, that she gave me tools and opportunity to compete in another way, to prove my competence and to improve my self-awareness and my confidence. In fact, in math class, she called me an intuitive mathematician, which I thought was brilliant because I love being intuitive at something. But I could do math all the way up to pre-calculus without writing it down, just in my head. But she told me one day, and maybe you all have heard this, math is not about the answer, Hasan. It's about the process. You ever heard that? Yeah. Then I asked her, well, why do you keep asking me for the answer? And she didn't have a good response for that. But apparently math is about the answer, not about the process, not the answer. And so I would get frustrated in class because I couldn't process, but I could answer. And so one day a week, she began doing this thing called mental math, where she would make all of the students clear their desks, close their books, and she would just start rattling off numbers. 5 times 3 plus 3 divided by 2 times 7. Answer, whatever it was. When she stopped, I always had the answer. So one day a week, she helped me feel like I was math god of the universe, which made it much easier for me to sit for those other 4 days a week and not be angry and frustrated and throwing things because it wasn't me, but patient, knowing that I would have my chance to shine. And those small things really allowed me to grow. Unfortunately, I was eventually expelled from Horizon School, and I got my GED. And the bold thinker that I am, with advocates like Dr. Lorraine Wilson and my mother, I decided that I should go to college. Everything in my life indicated that college was not on my list, but I had people telling me that I could be what I dreamed of being if I was willing to do the work, right? And it wasn't about that wishful thinking, it just happens magically. My mother made it clear to me early that my life was going to be a struggle. And the only choice I had to decide was if I was willing to struggle my entire life to get the things that I wanted or not. And if I wasn't, then I was going to have to accept whatever the world gave me. But if I was going to have to tighten up my gloves, tighten up my boots, and I was going to have to be ready to fight for it. And that's the advice that I want to give you. If you have dreams and aspirations, just because you have them doesn't mean they're going to come true, but having them is a good start. But then you have to be willing to do the work, to find the allies, to build the support system, to move you toward those things. And it doesn't always work. I finally talked my way into college, and that was a pretty amazing feat, having a 1.67 GPA and expulsion from alternative school and all the other experiences that I had, ADHD and dyslexia and challenges. But once I got there, I was afraid to tell anybody that I needed help to be successful because I felt like an imposter. There's something actually called the Imposter Syndrome, where you feel like you're in a place above your head and you're just waiting for somebody to figure out you're not supposed to be there and eject you from the pool. And I felt that way most of my early college career, so much so that I couldn't ask for the help that I deserved, the assistance that I had a right to. I was afraid to ask for those things because I thought it might wave some red flag. And so I began waiting for my roommate to fall asleep each night. And once I was sure he was asleep, I would pull out my penmanship pad. Now, some of you may not remember penmanship pads if you're young, but it was the writing pad that I've used since 3rd grade to practice my handwriting. It has the red line, the blue line, the red line. I see some of you nodding your head, even though I'm not even seeing you. But I would get out the penmanship pads that I've been using. My mother packed 3 or 4 pads of those into my suitcase when I came to college. And once I was sure my roommate was asleep, I would get my desk lamp out and I would pull out my penmanship pad and I would practice my handwriting like I've been doing my entire life. And after I went through a few pages of practicing my handwriting, hoping one day that I would be able to write like an adult or something, I would get out books from my classes and figure out which one I might be able to read 4 or 5 pages over and over again for the next hour or 2 and absorb enough that I could make an intuitive leap in class. What I'm saying is that I was completely in survival mode, not thriving, not flourishing, but just trying to survive, but not surviving with the support. And actually made it 3 semesters just piecing it together. And eventually I was expelled from school. Long story short, I was eventually expelled. I left, went back home, joined the Army. When I finished my training, I came back and I talked my way back in, and then I got expelled again. Now, most people would say, you would learn your lesson after one, but I'm not most people. And so I actually left, and I said I'd be back, and it was like, oh, no, you won't. But I determined that I was going to graduate from college. And one of the things that I learned about myself in that time away was that I needed to have the courage to ask the thing that I wanted in the world and let the world tell me no instead of always telling myself that the world won't ever let me have those things. I'm going to say that again. I had to finally give myself permission to dream big and expect that the world will meet me at big instead of staying small and shrinking and letting the world just pass me by. That's the way I summed it up. And so I talked my way back into school. I convinced them. And the thing that I did was I finally admitted that I had a problem that I needed help with. It was the hardest thing that I'd ever done in my life. I grew up running the streets, surviving with my brothers, asking for help, letting somebody else know that I needed them in order to succeed was hard. But I realized that it was the only thing that was going to change the outcome that I'd gotten so far. There's a quote that says, insanity is doing the same thing over and over again, but expecting by some miracle to get a different result. I wanted a different result, so I decided I had to do something different. And I think that each of you will find that you'll get to a point where if you're no longer happy with the result, you're going to have to try some new things, take some new risks. The thing about taking risks and trying new things is if they don't work, you can always go back to the other thing that didn't work in the first place. I say that to teachers all the time too. You can go back to teaching poorly after the innovative stuff doesn't work, but at least give it a shot. And so I went back and I admitted my challenges. I asked for help, and I convinced them, this was way back in the 80s, y'all, a long time ago, to give me a brand new computer called a Mac. And it had the very first spell check program on it. And with a spell check program and a grammatic program, Microsoft Write 1.1 for reference. I mean, 1.1, y'all. And they let me back in. They got me the assistive device that I needed because I finally had the courage to ask for what I needed instead of just accepting what people told me I deserved. I got back in, and that very first semester, I made the dean's list. The first time in my life I made the dean's list, but I made the dean's list because I had the right tools and I had the right attitude and I had the courage to believe that I should be there and that other people could help me be the person I want to be. All those things had to line up. It wasn't any one of them. It was all of those together. Accessing the supports that were necessary, using the technology that now I'm just amazed at the technology that's here, but the supports, and then using those to prove what I have inside to the outside world.
Hasan, should we advance any slides?
No.
Okay.
Well, sure. Advance, yeah. I should say the challenge of education, higher education, which I guess I'm on.
Hold on. There we are. You're on that page now, the challenge of higher education. Thanks, Hasan.
Actually, advance one more.
Okay.
And I'm going to, this is going to be the slide that I stop on. I've been working, like I said, on this presentation since the youth advisory committee decided to invite me to do this months ago. And just recently, it really struck me that there were some things that I needed to say. So in these last few minutes, I want to talk about hope and resilience. But I also want to talk about expectations. In this time of COVID-19, of personal isolation, my sense is that there's some times when we think that other people's needs are greater than ours because they're struggling. This idea of comparative suffering, I don't have a right to complain because my life, is rough, but compared to their life, it's not. It's a false narrative to reduce your expectations and hopes in the world because other people face challenges like you do. One of the things that has been most hard fought for in this community and in our communities is the right to access supports and services that should have always been just a right. And I think that now, with so many people losing assistive support because of isolation, people losing their connections, I think it's important, and I just want to say it out loud, it's important for you to maintain a sense of your own value and your own expectations without regard to the rest of the world. The world is going to move itself and continue to move and manage and rate what's important. But the thing that I had to learn early on is that I will not reduce my level of importance in the world. The world can decide where my needs are, but I'm not going to give it permission to overlook my needs. I don't know if that makes sense, but my fear and the things that I've seen with a few of the young folks that I have a chance to mentor and coach is that sometimes we feel like we should just wait our turn and that other people have needs. We all have needs, and your needs are not any more or any less valuable than the needs of all the other amazing folks in the world. And so you being able to keep your needs and your expectations at the front of your mind will make it much more likely that you'll get those needs met. And there'll be times when somebody might say, well, we've got this emergency over here that we have to deal with, so we're going to have to let A and B slide for now. And that's a choice, but we can work with that. But not being on the list of things that have to be, that the people that deserve and need to be taken care of, because you don't think that you're worthy, is a true sense of what many folks feel who experience the world differently. And I just want to be very clear that in order for us to get from you the very best that you can give to us, and I'm talking about what we need from you. We need you're brilliant, you're brave, and you're courageous. We need you who are navigating the world differently to show us what courage is like, and we need you to show up. And so I'm asking you not to allow yourself to be disappeared again. For so long, the world has tried to isolate and separate for arbitrary differences, and don't let that happen. So back to hope and resilience, my final comments. I always say that hope is a reliance on future possibility. It's a belief that if I act in a certain way today, if I seek out the supports and services that I want and put together, that tomorrow will be better and will move me closer to the person that I want to be in the world and the gift that I want to bring to the world. Resilience is about the things that happen when, the world doesn't give us everything we need, right? When we do fall down, when we make mistakes, when something happens that we didn't intend. I always say resilience is about falling, right? If you're not afraid of falling, you know, or if there's no chance of falling, then you don't have to have resilience. But those of us who fall, the trick is about the bounce. Resilience is that bounce. Resilience is having allies, friends, and family that hold you up and remind you how great you are. Resilience is about taking that negative energy that somebody might want to give to you and reshaping it into the fuel that drives you to prove that they don't get to decide. When I went to law school, after I finally graduated from Berea. When I graduated Berea, I was president of the student body. I was homecoming king. I got to lead in the school play. It was amazing. But in law school, they actually refused to give me the supports and services that I finally realized I had a right to. And I fought them every year, every semester for that. I got expelled from law school 3 times because they would not give me the supports that I needed. But I want to be really clear. I did not miss one day of class in law school because I refused to leave. They were like, but that's not how it works. And I said, well, you don't understand my intention then. And then I was clear to them like I'm clear to you. I came here to get a law degree, and you let me in. That means you are now responsible for my success like I am. So we have to figure this out together. So I took that, the pain they kept trying to tell me that I didn't deserve to be there, and I refocused it back on them and said, no, you know, I deserve it, and you're going to help me figure it out. After I finally graduated from law school, we were able to rebuild their whole system of supports and services, including how they engage with vocational rehab to make sure that every student has what they need, and there are no assumptions that people at that place, you know, shouldn't have to, you know, need anything in addition. And so I just want to encourage you, stay hopeful, but also remember that you have resilience. The fact that you're here right now, the fact that you're engaged means that you've come through lots of difficult things already, and you can get through many more of those things. And so I just want to thank you all for the opportunity. I apologize again for not being able to show my face and to speak to you, but I do so appreciate Martha, Janine, and the whole team who have made it possible for me to still engage with you all. And I hope that you all have enjoyed it like I have. I think I'm ready to turn it back over. There are probably 50 more slides, Martha. I apologize.
It's okay. Hasan, thank you very much. And I just want to let our viewers know that we did start late because we had technical difficulty with the internet at Hasan's, and we're going to go a little bit over. So if you need to leave, you know, we just want to let folks know that we are recording this. So if you need to leave, you're fine to leave. You can always return back to it. And we're going to do some questions and answers. So far, I only see in the Q&A one question, which I will read out loud, and then I would encourage folks, actually before I do that, I think we're going to do a poll for those of you that are still on the call. Did you learn something new? If you could take a few minutes to fill this out, and then we'll get to the Q&A. We're going to launch a poll.
Great. Thank you, Martha.
Thank you, Hasan. We'll give it a few minutes. Okay, 96% of our viewers said yes, they did learn something new. So Hasan, again, thank you. This has been wonderful, even though we had technical challenges. So we're going to move to the Q&A. And again, I invite our audience, you know, I have one youth, I think, or an adult. I have to go back and look either way. I have one question in here, so I'm going to read it. The question is, and I encourage other folks to please write in, what would you say to someone like me who has had a hard time understanding things but wants to be in college?
That's a great question. And so my first advice would be to build your network. I think that college is a possibility for so many of us now, but we have to do it intentionally. One of the things that I learned is I couldn't go in the way other people did. And so building that network, reaching out to support services, vocational rehab, every college and institution now has an office of support services of some kind. And what I've learned is that when you reach out, most of them are underserved, underutilized. And so when someone actually reaches out and connects with them, they're very often really excited to see what they can do to support that, to support your success at that school. And so I would suggest some homework up front to build out those connections and actually reach out, be very intentional so that you know what's there. And then think about your coursework. One of the things that I had to do, recognizing that I couldn't navigate reading and writing like other students, was that I had to shift my focus of the classes that I would take. I took more seminar classes where it was about discussion, and I could really move at my own pace, and I could have my own opinions that weighed as much as my ability to write. And so really thinking about what it is you want to do and how to creatively build that. I actually built my own major in literally in spoken communications, oral communications major that I built all around speaking, because this is the thing that I'm really good at. And I knew that I could use that to balance all the other things that I had challenges with. And so finding a way to really look at your strengths and your skills and then build your curriculum around it. And there's so many independent majors now, so many directions you can go, that having conversations with those advocates in the schools, I think you can build the curriculum that you can be successful with. And then the biggest piece is to not give up. Just because it's hard doesn't mean it's impossible, but it will mean that you have to put in the work. So you have to have that commitment to work, sometimes more than others. I had to commit to working and reading, 3 times as long as other people, and to spend twice as long writing my papers, and all that at the beginning, so that I didn't get frustrated when my friends were going out to hang out and party, and they were going to the game, and I was still in my room trying to get the work done. It limited the frustration when I knew up front, and I'd already made the commitment that I was going to do whatever I had to do to be successful. And then, it just took time.
Great. Thank you, Hasan. We have one more question. Unless we have other folks, I'll just check the box. How do you determine what is the best college as far as support for folks with disabilities? We have had both good support and terrible support. Do you have any tips?
I have some thoughts, which I hope doesn't surprise anybody. I think that the internet has become a very important tool in this search. Things like Reddit and all these other information gathering places where you can go in and ask a query. I've noticed a lot more young folks have been using that to kind of test theories of institutions, because you can get information from people who've experienced them, and students are pretty vocal and very clear about their own experiences. And so I think one way is to do a good search of internet resources. There are a lot of Facebook pages where young people go, not just young people, but where people who are tech savvy. I would say young people, because I have a hard time with technology sometimes still, even though I had the very first personal computer in the world, maybe. But using that as a resource, putting out questions, and then even doing interviews. Literally calling up an institution and talking to their support services folks and saying, can you tell me how you supported students in the last year that have come with you with different learning styles and abilities? Can you share some examples of the kind of tools that you can provide? And those types of things really do create, one, for them, it lets them know that you're serious about being there, and your expectations are high. But I think it gives you a good chance to see what they have to offer, at least a good lens. They could tell a good story and still be terrible in execution, and sometimes we just have to do that by trial and error. But I think some research ahead of time will help eliminate some of those challenges and give you the best chance at having success the first time. But I think that's a very important question that to really consider.
Thank you, Hasan. So I see that we have 2 more questions, and I apologize, that's probably all we're going to have time for before we wrap up. So we'll go through the next 2 questions and then we'll close. So the next 2 questions are, bear with me. Okay, bear with me. How do you manage the stress of feeling different from your peers? How can we let others know we are worthwhile even though we are different? Often first impressions can close so many doors when with just a little bit of support, we could do an amazing job. For example, if I'm given the right training and a supportive boss. Great question.
That's a great question. You know, I think that's a great question. For me, a big part of it has been, and so I'm gonna say this. One, I'm an extrovert. I'm an extreme extrovert. I think part of that probably did come from realizing that the only way that I was going to stay in some places is if I met everybody in the room and they were like, oh, we love him, he's great. You know, I don't know why he's here, but we love him here. And so part of what I did as a young person, and I still do to some degree, is I make it personal. Even when I, you know, was in college, the thing that I did when I got expelled was I went to the dean in person instead of sending a letter, a response to a letter. And I asked to speak to the whole committee, even though that wasn't something that people did. And so in doing that, I introduced myself and I made it very clear who I was so that there wasn't any confusion on the parts of other people why I was there. That's a big ask for lots of folks who aren't necessarily extroverts or confident in their ability to navigate socially. It was a thing that I had to do to survive. But even if that's not your go-to, I think having the chance to speak, asking for the opportunity to have a meeting with, especially in employment situations, to talk about support is a lot like being in school. Talk about the supports and the needs that you have and the things that you think you can produce because of it. You know, if I have these things, I think I can be a very productive member of your team. Those types of conversations are really important and valuable. I think sometimes in relationships, it's a little more challenging for me. But again, my mama told me that it was either going to be a hard life or it was going to be an isolated life. And I decided, recognizing the challenge, that I was going to make that challenge work for me. And so part of it is having a thicker skin. And I'm going to be clear. I really hate that the advice that seems best is that sometimes we just have to be tough. It makes me sad every time I have to say it out loud, and I'm sorry, I'm got to make sure my brain doesn't get ahead of me too far. But if we are going to engage in life fully, as full as we can, then we're going to have to, no, I'm sorry, I'm going to take it back to me because I really am trying to stop broad statements. I realized that I was going to have to step out further at times than other people and take risks more often than others in order to connect. And it wasn't always something that I felt good about, but knowing that I did everything that I could to make a connection, if that connection didn't work, then I didn't feel like it was my fault. I didn't feel like that I had some failure. I realized it was someone else's inability to meet me where I was. And there'll be some people who just can't meet you where you are. And it's absolutely about them and their issues, not about us. And I would encourage you to hold strongly to that in your own head and heart, that other people's issues are not your problem. And and be strong in that, and refuse to allow other people's problems and challenges to be the thing that slows you down or makes you sad about your own life. You know, you've got amazing life to live and to figure out. You've got time to be worried about all them other people.
Thank you, Hasan. So here's our last question, and the question is, do you have tips for interviews for those of us with social skills differences? This is sometimes the biggest hurdle.
That's a wonderful one, too. You all are taxing my brain today. Yes. So, again, I think that communication is the piece that I always go back to. If you're going to find yourself in an interview, one of the things that I would suggest is contacting human resources ahead of the interview, asking if they could, so here's the line, right? We don't have a responsibility or a duty to disclose, right? We have a right to our privacy like anyone else. And so that creates sometimes some challenges, because we know as soon as we walk in the room, people are going to be writing down what they notice and assume about us anyway. And so one of the things that I have found to be helpful is contacting, and again, think about it. When we take the initiative to contact the employer and say, hey, I'm coming in for an interview, and I want to make sure that I understand and have everything I need to be successful. Can you tell me about who I'm going to be interviewing with? Sometimes I communicate better in writing, or I communicate better if I'm prepared. Is it possible to get some of the standard questions that you all use? I understand you might ask some questions just to know me personally, but are there standard interview questions that I could see ahead of time so that I can better prepare to make sure that I can answer those questions and give you my very best thoughts on them? Again, a lot of people don't ask for much, and people don't expect it. But when we do ask, there are a lot of folks who are willing, just because there was a request, to see what they can do to fulfill the request. And so believing enough in yourself and in your right to be in the conversation, to ask those questions early, to engage with the people you're going to be meeting with and that organization, and make it clear that you want to be engaged and as present as possible, I think is more time than not going to be seen as a plus. And then maybe also, as you introduce yourself when you're there, explain to them, for me personally, my left ear has gone out. I was supposed to have surgery or hearing aid or something. And so now I find myself having to turn and listen with my right side more. And so when I talk to people, I explain to them, hey, I'm suffering hearing loss here. So when I turn here, or when I look at your face intently, because I do that because I read lips as much as I hear, understand that I'm just trying to make sure that I understand context and meaning. I'm not just being intense and creepy. And even now with the mask now, it's harder for me to hear people, because I didn't realize how much I was actually listening and looking at lips at the same time. But being able to tell folks those things so that they understand, that you are adjusting to the environment so that you can be as effective as possible, I think really gives you the best light going into the situation.
Thank you, Hasan.
Thank you for the question.
And that was our last question. I'd like to take time to really thank you so much, Hasan, to participate today and to share your thoughts with everyone here in Vermont, and your flexibility in adjusting to all of our challenges with technology today. I also want to let everyone know, I'd like to thank everyone who attended also. Thank you so much, and thank you for your patience as we move through this presentation and our challenges. This afternoon, Hasan will have an interactive workshop called Finding Your Story, and it's especially for youth and young adults. We are also looking to repeat this workshop hopefully in August. We're going to be chatting more with Hasan about that. And again, I'd like to thank everyone for joining us today. You will be receiving a short survey and a follow-up email along with the link to the recording. of this webinar. And if you complete the survey, you may enter a drawing to win one of two $25 Amazon gift cards. So again, thank you everyone for your attendance, your wonderful questions, and your patience with everything.